Hello and welcome to the HPTV podcast with Mitchell Marshall, Steven, just one name like Cher, and Jamie Lestrange. We're going to talk about Fantastic Beasts and where to find them today. And I'm very curious on your guys' initial thoughts and how positive or negative it's going to go, because we're doing all three movies no matter what. I've left encouraged. But first, we want to say there's not much going on news-wise. After we got that big casting dump, there's just been little bits of speculation here and there. There are some more sets going up, but some people got in trouble for some of those photos.
I thought that was funny. Some people got legal notices.
Well, like the Twitter guy got a legal notice, but he got the photos from a construction company that was like, we're building stuff for the new Harry Potter series. And I was like, it's only King's Cross, which like we all know what it looks like. There's not that much they can do differently, but I'm like, you should really know not to post stuff like that.
Yeah.
Nick Frost has kind of started speaking about it, and he had like, I wouldn't call it an emotional interview, but he kind of had some really nice things to say. He's like, I get to be Hagrid, and he talked about being protected of these kids. Excited. Because Hagrid's protective and he has his own kids and just being part of that magical world. And I think sometimes we forget that, like whatever controversy there is around it or whatever we're thinking as a piece of IP, like there's something really magical about this story, and he's excited to be part of telling it. And he was saying that he's seen something. He's like, oh, I've seen some costumes. I think he specifically mentioned the Sorting Hat and some of the sets. And I was like, that kind of got my heart a little bit more excited.
Like, I'm just so curious, like the Sorting Hat, right? Like, how are they going to do it different this time? Or are they going to try and keep it really similar? Like, just the whole aesthetic and what direction they're going to take it. I'm really curious to see. So him just telling us that he gets to see crap like that makes me really jealous.
I know. I got to sneak
us a picture or something.
I got to get up to Leaves and be like, do you guys need a grip? An assistant grip? I'm sure I could support my family on a grip salary.
Sure.
Minor ship economy.
I saw posts on the Reddit today, and there's all these stupid little philosophical discussions on there all the time. But today it was saying, we are not getting a remake of the movies. They hate that phrase. They're like, we're getting a readaptation of the books. And I was like, that's semantics, though, isn't it?
No, I don't think so.
But
because they're not redoing what the movies are.
Right.
And the movies are so different. They're adapting from the book in a different way.
It is, but it is I guess I just feel like it's a remake material of the core content. It's our second screen adaptation, only within 2.5 decades, which is not a long time. Obviously, Saying Goodbye really only was it 2011 that number 8 came out, so it's going to be 15 years between those.
Would you say like a Spider-Man?
It's not a remake. I get it. It's not a remake of the movies because it has nothing to do with those movies. Those are not a jumping off point.
Yeah.
But we can't pretend they don't exist. We can't pretend that these aren't a new iteration, new visual version of something we've already seen a visual version of.
Yeah, I was just thinking like this because there's been other like multiple adaptations of things before, and they came out pretty freaking different. I mean, if you guys ever saw the Golden Compass that came out when we were younger, which was a total flop, and then they created the series not too long ago, I think it was on HBO, of His Dark Materials, which was very different, like tonally, but it was really cool. And so I think that there's ways, and I think the same thing with the Lord of the Rings. They did like a Lord of the Rings movie, which was like the first book in like half of the second or something like that, and this is like the 80s, I want to say. And it's really bad. And
sounds bad.
That was just a cartoon.
And then they flushed
Percy
it out
Jackson.
and made the Peter Jackson one. Yeah, Percy Jackson
just did it. There's another modern, the Narnia they're about to redo. Which
I think there are real advantages to like knowing what didn't work that first time and being able to grow from it, right? Because those ones, like each iteration got better, I feel like. And especially because some of those first ones were really, really bad. And so hopefully they do the same thing, right? Hopefully they learned all the lessons that, we talked about, of course, as we went through all the movies, and they're able to make it into something
or better, they just want more money because Tobey Maguire did nothing wrong.
IP.
Okay.
There's IP there. Well, he did do the emo Spider-Man 3.
Okay, he did 3. He did 3.
But, and I don't even think it's like looking at what they did wrong, but like looking what you could do different. And within that difference, going back to the source material to see like what hasn't been explored or what people haven't seen. I don't know. I just think like, people are complaining about this all the time. Like, it hasn't been that long. They don't need to redo everything, but they are remaking everything. It's already happening. It's like, we have like 3 different Little Women movies and they're all different. There's so many ways to interpret things. And I don't think that's an awful thing. I think there also should be fresh and original ideas. But I'm excited as like a Harry Potter fan to see someone else's take on it and hopefully get to see visually some of the things that we've read in the books that honestly we might have looked really fakey and weird 20 years ago. So
Yeah, technology has gotten better, and again, it's not a different medium, but it's a different storytelling avenue to do it for television, and this new hybrid of television and movies where you get the quality and then you're getting these 6 to 8 to 12 hour things, whereas we used to get, oh, this season needs to be at least 13 22 episodes. Not that they would have done that with Potter, but I mean, it wouldn't have been the craziest thing. Also, there was not as much money then to make it look this good, to feel this good. Remember, George Lucas wanted to make a Star Wars TV series long before they actually were coming, but he said the technology is not there yet to do it at the price point. And now, not that technology is perfectly there, because I don't want them to rely on the crap, but the money is in streaming. And so we're going to get that opportunity. No, I'm excited for it. I just think, yeah, I hope that they ignore the movies and try to not be like them in a lot of ways. But obviously there were good things in the movies we enjoy, but they really are focusing on, how do we make this, give us a completely different feel? Is it more camp? Is it more serious? I don't know. Not that it needs to be that specific.
It'll be easier, I feel like, because at first I was like interested in how they talked about how they'll kind of take some of the inspiration from the movies, from the look and stuff. But I almost want them to do something completely different, because
I don't want them to.
The movies do hold a special place in my heart, even though we just went through complaining about a lot of them. And I'm very nostalgic for them. But even I was just at our sister's house, and she was showing me all the wands that she got, that she just went to Epic. And like, she was showing me some of her old wands. And I'm like, it is kind of weird.
How many wands does she have?
A lot. I don't think as many as me, but she has a good amount. She has like a Sorcerer's Stone wand.
She's some anniversary ones, like she would
Yeah,
choose one
they're
of the
not like
celebration events and stuff,
character
which is kind of cool. They're a
necessarily.
little bit. She got ones you could only get for a limited time too, which I think is good, because I went to one of the celebration things with her once.
Yeah, that's the one I think she showed me. So, but I was like, I wonder what they're gonna do. Like, wand, it's gonna be weird to me that Harry has a different wand, which is like, seems probably really silly to a lot of people, but it's gonna be all new and different. And a lot of things aren't described to a T in the book, so there's a lot of room.
Yeah.
To choose.
Oh yeah, there's so much wiggle room. Well, one of the things that I like keep reading about that kind of annoys me is people, they seem to kind of reduce this down to like, oh, there's these 7 books and they can adapt it into a TV series, but like there's nothing else after. Like her world isn't fleshed out enough. And I disagree. I think there's still so much to explore in there, and it really annoys me that people seem to think like this is like they're remaking it because there's nothing else to like build upon or add, and in part because Fantastic Beasts didn't really, work out. But I will say, after rewatching the first movie, it gives me hope. Like there's so much fun stuff in there. I'm excited to hopefully
There's a
see it
thirst
again.
for it. So if it does well, then they will make more. They will ask Joe what happens next, or what happened in this situation. But yeah, Jamie, you're talking about wands. I remember I went to the studio tour like right around the time of the Fantastic Beasts, and they had the wands for the main 3 wizards and witches, and I was like, ooh, maybe I should get one of those. Like I knew I wasn't like obsessed with that movie, but I was kind of like into this expansion of the world and like seeing New York and everything. So
that's when I bought this.
Oh wow, that's big! You flew that back?
Yeah.
You guys did
whole suitcase.
I just gave myself a paper cut.
Steven, I think one year you drew me for Christmas. We do Secret Santa as a family, and you got me the screenplay in book form of the first Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I'm pretty sure it was you. Hopefully, I'm not discrediting.
Maybe. I'm a pretty good gift giver, so probably.
But like,
he'll take credit at least.
Jamie, why don't you give us some of the details behind this film, and then we can kind of give our initial feelings.
This came out in 2016, 5 years after Part 2, which was the last of the Harry Potter series. It was directed by David Yates again, and this was written by J.K. Rowling in her debut as a screenwriter. It grossed $234 million in the U.S. and a total of $814 million worldwide. As of today, it has a 74% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty good. The critic, but I think the audience was around it. It was pretty close. It was nominated for 2 Academy Awards and won for Best Costume Design, becoming the first Wizarding World film to ever win an Academy Award.
That comes off all really positive. Look, if anything doesn't cross $1 billion now, that's a big blockbuster. It kind of gets looked at a failure. Well, one, this is after the 3D boom, but before like things have kind of calmed down. I mean, and against its budget, it probably was profitable, especially with all the merch and stuff. But I always say, if you look at a budget, then you kind of double it for marketing and other costs, and just studios kind of lie about some of the costs, or they hide costs for producers under other productions or other budgets. But in the end, I think this was profitable. I think people enjoyed it. It was kind of more of a family film. It was kind of obviously it wasn't a school film, so it was taking into a new world. It obviously incorporated America, so like they were kind of taking all these little chances, and it was very creature focused, which is not really my thing. So it put all this out into the world, and I don't want to say it fell flat, but it didn't excite everyone. But I think people were open to it. They saw the world expanding, and they were ready to take the next step. And the next step was unfortunate. But let's start with this one. Let's be positive.
I will say, I just looked up, the budget was 175 100 million to 200 million. So it did
easily
pretty well.
It made money, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and
it made 114.
And and like to add on to what you're saying, what they did with this was kind of cool too. They took like us who had grown up with these movies and these books, and then they made it a little more adult. So now all of a sudden with people like in their 20s and older, so they kind of played off of that, where it really wasn't like at all a children's movie anymore. Not that the last.
I think the creatures kind of helped it be a
like
little bit more of
but
like
it's a little creepy of a movie.
That Niffler's cute.
They're scary, and I mean they don't like overtly say it, but I think there's a little bit of horniness to this movie too.
Yeah,
like
which
JK
likes.
Like they're staying in the girls are staying in that boarding hall where boys aren't allowed to be, and there's obviously two romantic connections, and she can read minds. Yeah, we'll get to that.
What did they get, Jacob?
Well, I think it's just fun because one is the magical creatures, right? Like a few of them are mentioned in the Harry Potter books, so you're familiar with them. And it was kind of cool to see those like pop up. But it was also fun. Like this movie is very much like in the Muggle world. And then you have kind of these magical people and elements. And so it created a very different tone. And then just like you said, it wasn't about kids this time, right? It was about adults and, you know, people who are, you know, cops more or less, right? Trying to stop people and keep the peace. There's a little political aspect to it too, which was interesting. And so it was really, though it was imperfect, there was a cool jumping off point. Yeah, there was so much like, where is this going to go next? How cool is this going to get?
Then it goes in a completely different.
Yeah.
They just play all the things. Anyway.
That's one thing we've talked about is like building a magical system. Like I think in a good way, J.K. Rowling kept it contained. It wasn't that intricate or deep in a way that allowed it to get more intricate and deep. Like she didn't lock in the magical system by being like, this is how it was in my 7 books. It can't change. And so she obviously wrote this. And so you got more deep with the creatures and the Obscurus, which I think deserves its own discussion. But you think about Star Wars was also all adults. You know, you had a young-ish protagonist. You know, he acted like a brat, but he was an adult technically, right? So I think there was this family friendly element, while there was also like, it was a little bit dark. It was considered an action adventure. And I think it almost, maybe it did fall into no man's land in that case, where it was like this fantasy film that was like stuck between audiences. It's also important to remark, this came out just before Thanksgiving, which made it very, that's a huge time for Americans to go to the movies.
Movie. Yeah.
What's interesting is that only really applies to America. Like a late November release here doesn't actually signify that much, which is interesting. And I think it just kind of like, it didn't explode, but I don't think anyone's hopes were like dampened, like, ooh, the IP is not going to move in a positive direction. I think people after this, they weren't like excited, but they were open to it getting better. And I think the mistake, well, it went in another direction. I was excited about elements of it.
I was excited until
I think it put Warner Brothers in a panic, and they said, okay, we introduce Grindelwald, which we'll talk about that twist later, but they were like, ooh, we got to get Dumbledore in here a lot faster than we thought, because it was really supposed to be a 5-movie series. And I was like, when you bring Dumbledore in that early, we can't call it Fantastic Beasts because you sideline the hell
Or you should have brought him in at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like it just, we'll get into that. What did you guys think? Like, what were your feelings when you heard that they were going to make this a movie, and before you actually saw the movie? What were you guys thinking? We had just been burned by Cursed Child, just to take you back.
It is true. Well, and it was just kind of in the sense of Cursed Child, right? It was like that there wasn't like source material, right? There wasn't a book that was being based on. They were going straight to a screenplay with it, and we know, again, that didn't go super great with Cursed Child. So I was really excited, but there was a lot of trepidation. I remember when Eddie Redmayne got announced as, you know, Newt, I was excited because, I mean, you can just kind of see him in the magical world, and I mean, I think he played it a little more awkward and stuff than maybe I would have expected. But no, I feel like, and then you start seeing some of the artwork and the previews and things, and you're like, okay, it could be fun. I remember being happier about that thinking, okay, this isn't another Cursed Child. I think I could say that.
See, I remember thinking Fantastic Beasts is not the way I want them to take this. And I think after seeing the movie, I actually felt better because I realized they were kind of going to Trojan horse a bit of the Dumbledore Grindelwald into it, which is like, okay, Grindelwald is kind of known as the last really great bad wizard. and the pre-Voldemort. So it's like, we're kind of going to get that. We're going to be connected to Harry Potter through Dumbledore. So, but yeah, I was just a little confused at why we're doing it. It was a catchy name. Love to hear behind the scenes at Warner Brothers what the other pitches were for like, where should we take this franchise next, and why Joe wanted to write this.
Well, and I wonder too, like, did she go in with a 5? I mean, I believe at the very beginning, it wasn't 5 yet. I think they, after the first did pretty well, yeah. I think they jumped it. I think they went from like 3 to 5. I can't remember for sure. But I wonder how much they knew about where she wanted to take the story. So I was trepidatious but excited. We had just had Cursed Child, but that wasn't written by JK, even though she approved it. But I was excited to hear that she was going to write this. So I was like, okay, well, it's from her mind. And we liked before what was from her mind. This is before we were really burned in a lot of ways from her, like changing things. And even some of the things like Newt should be a lot older. Like, I don't know. Like, there was just a lot that all of a sudden changed, which is the like, timeline, okay. Yeah. But I was excited to learn more about the U.S. stuff. Excited that was going to be part of it. And also, I was in such a different place in my life. I thought about this. I had my first child by then. So it was like, I just thought about like where I was at, like when Harry Potter ended. Like I was still like a pretty young adult. Like I just grown up so much. So it like didn't take up as much space in my life as like Harry Potter once had. So I was like, just like, oh, we'll see what happens. I wasn't like super invested.
I must have had a lack of enthusiasm because I don't remember in the drum up trying to like, and maybe that's the nature of the film that it didn't make me want to like dig into the lore and understand it. And yeah, they gave up on the timeline because actually I remember at the studio tour, there's a portrait of Newt Scamander and it's him in like medieval, it says like 17, so they completely swapped around, which is fine because you would think that if it's like the definitive text, the Fantastic Beasts text, it would be a little bit older than, you know, whatever, because he must have wrote it in the 40s or 50s or something at that scale. But I always just say, you know what, that's all that canon universe for the films, and I don't mind if you mess with the time a little bit to like, if you have a great story to tell, and I think that they just had a good story to tell. But let's go into what we didn't like. Let's have a little howler about something that did not sit very well with us. The worst part. Steven, what was your worst part?
I mean, there's something that I hated, but I think it was very clear, like you said, partway through the story that like, oh, this isn't really a Fantastic Beasts story, or kind of is, but like we're going to shoehorn in this Grindelwald stuff and we're going to make that like, this is what it was actually about all along. That was a little annoying to me, but it was still also like acceptable because it was really interesting. I never liked there was something just so weird tonally about all the Second Salem people and I just never quite bought that he was that, I don't know, traumatized, you know, like I just didn't get that like to mess him up enough to be an Obscurus and all that. So that was I think where there were some misses there. I don't know if it was the acting necessarily or the writing itself, but that group didn't feel like a legitimate enough like opponent or antagonists.
I think some of it just also didn't come together because that's kind of supposed to be a twist also, that is the Obscurus and everything, and then you get the Grindelwald twist on the back of it, which I mean, going from Colin Farrell to Johnny Depp is like, it was kind of cool in some ways, but it didn't all come together because
and Johnny Depp was a complete surprise.
Which they were like, which is so one thing I like, even though it doesn't come together perfectly, one thing I like about this screenplay is that Joe wrote it as a screenplay, and it didn't have some of the difficult rushing that you have to have when it's a book being converted. Like, who was it? Steve Kloves, who did most of the Harry Potter movies. So I think that it actually really showed that she wrote this for this medium. And I think that's one of the issues I have with the second film, is that it feels like it was a book adapted to a movie because so much they try and squeeze in there. And they do squeeze a lot in here. They do set up a lot. Yes. You do go through a lot of adventures. I think it's 2 hours and 11 minutes. I may have had to watch the last bit at 1.25 to get through because I was procrastinating. I had a doctor's appointment. I had a real good reason. Anyway, yes. So the thing that I didn't like was Ezra Miller.
Concur.
So Ezra Miller was too old for the part. And when I remember when they got cast, there was like they were kind of coming along and people were like, they're going to be this great serious actor. And they were also going to be the Flash, which is supposed to be like this very cheeky, clever young man. So I already knew I didn't like Ezra Miller. This has nothing to do with the controversies afterwards because like a lot happened in succession. I think they came out and then they had a couple of instances of violence, and I don't know what they've been doing after The Flash. And they were barely part of the marketing for The Flash because of those controversies. And so I didn't actually hate The Flash. There were a couple of really horrible things about it. And I think the attitude and the character that Ezra chose for that part was not horrible, but there's something that rubbed me the wrong way. And I really like the book, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And that movie, I can't quite, featuring Hermione, I couldn't quite get invested in because of Ezra's, like, there was something that just didn't click for me about that. And it's funny that in that movie, they were playing Emma's age, and then they were supposed to be like a child in this movie that came out 5 years after a movie where Emma was an adult.
How old were they when this came out? I wonder. That's my issue. I kind of get why they wanted that age, maybe for the following movies, so it's not weird. You know, they're not tagging along with a 10-year-old. And part of the whole plot is that, what's the character's name? Credence. Credence is not a child. And so it's like usually the Obscurus isn't a child, and it's like crazy that he survived this long.
Credence matured, but
there's something in between. Like, I think they needed to cast 5 years younger, maybe more. It's just the outfit, but it just looks goofy. And then I don't think they are a bad actor, but it just felt like overdone in a lot of ways. Anyway, so I just laughed when you said that, because Mike Howler, that's all I have is Ezra. I just think it was bad casting, and I don't know. I didn't even hate it when I saw the movie, but just watching back, I was just like, why was this choice made? I feel like it was probably exciting at the time because Ezra had a lot of things on the horizon and had done some good things younger.
He's a big name at the time.
I don't know.
Yeah, very much considered an up-and-comer. But the puritanical, because this is like echoing literally the Protestants and going after the witches in Salem. You know, they're called the Second Salem. And I think it's important to give the background, which I don't know how effectively the movie got it across, that there was a character essentially who fell in love with a muggle, and the muggle turned out to be, this is deep. The reason why Makusa is like, you cannot date or fraternize with no-mages. So I'm going to try and say a no-mage, and I actually don't hate the term, but look, I've been using muggle for 30 years. Okay. So they essentially, a no-mage who was a descendant of a wizard who hunted wizards or something like that, seduced a witch who then gave him information, and then he published information about wands, and there was all this, and I believe the last name was Rappaport or something. I hope I'm not messing that up. But then there was this law that came into place that essentially made wizards kind of go into hiding, but really separate and become more of an anti-no-mage in response to like the fear of what would happen if they were hunted and found out, which is interesting because in the British, it's more like, we're not keeping it segregated, but we're stopping these people because they want to control the muggles. So it's a different relationship between the non-magical and magical folk. And I think that's where they didn't do a great job of describing the government's relationship between magical and non-magical, and then how that's reflected in how they're governing these people and their interactions with the no-mages. So I did read up on that background. I don't know how well I delivered it, but there's that political / cultural history that is just quite different. And that also makes Jacob Kowalski, who is brilliant, a little bit of a one note, but so much fun. Very proud of our first. One thing I said about this was the characters none of them are bad, and they all are set up to be much wider. But I think other than Newt, the other three are a little bit like they're a sitcom character that gets introduced with a shtick, and then we need to see them brought in over a season. And so you'd think over the first film they'd have a little arc, and then over the 3 to 5 films they'd have a bigger arc, because is her name Teeny? Like, she starts off very like naive, almost a little bit out of it. Obviously she's got this trauma behind her that we learn a bit more, and Jacob's just kind of the comedy.
You mean
Queenie. Is it Teeny and Queenie?
Yeah, Teeny is the
or is it Tina and Queen? Anyway, I just watched it. Like, guys, before we started recording, I was just watching this. Anyway, I love the 4 main characters though, and I think that's really important. Is that like I was rooting for all of them. I was interested in all of them. But yeah, because Teeny is just trying to teen witch Sabrina
Tina and Queenie.
She's just trying to get her job back because she's made some mistakes. But anyway, I think, and setting it in America, obviously we're American, but I think New York in the 20s is a very nostalgic, very like, that is a good entry point for the world to be like, make them feel like, we're not Americanizing the films.
And I will say she really tried to play into the politics of America at the time. Like mentioned multiple times that Jacob had been in Europe for the war and he just came back, and how a lot of soldiers weren't allowed opportunities after coming back and things like that. Like she tried, like there's a lot of things put in there. Obviously, like the whole prohibition might help. Like that was a big element. The
speakeasy was dope. Yeah,
the speakeasy was dope, but also like kind of wrapping the wizarding world. Like that's how that translated in kind of the same ways with trying to hide witches and wizards, the same way as you were hiding like speakeasies.
Well, I think too, just because what Mitch was talking about with the politics, like I don't have a big issue with the fact that in the first movie we got kind of like surface level with like here's how they act about no-mages and the relationship there, because in future there are opportunities to then dig into that and get kind of the why. But again, like we've talked about a few times, they didn't do that, right? They just went left with the second movie, and so you didn't get like this additional depth to the things that were introduced. You got like left hanging, and so we kind of had to go on Pottermore and stuff like that and figure out like the history ourselves, and it's not spelled out, which hurts the experience a lot.
I kind of like in the end that it ends up jumping around. Like we go, this one's mostly, I think it's all centered in the US. And then the next one, it's a lot of Paris, shout out to Epic Universe. And there's more country. And then I think we see Berlin in the end. We see like a few countries. And this is also when, Pottermore's getting released, where we're learning about tiny bits of Asia and Africa and Brazil and like different elements of I love the way that world was expanding. But I think if we could have had the first two mostly in the States, maybe you jump over halfway through the second, like it lets you build in some of that story and how that affects. But it really seems like they told this story and then they were like, hey, we're globetrotting. That seems to be like it was the plan though, because when they at the end they erased everyone's memories.
I think she definitely wanted to touch on different countries, wizarding worlds and stuff like that, which is really cool, and I appreciate you doing that. But it's weird to like delve kind of into like political ideals around America, and then you just leave that behind, because in the end of this movie, America doesn't look too hot. We just murder people. Like, oh, you might expose us. Dead. Like,
it would have been nice to get a coda of like, here's how the government then adjusted.
And like, but at the same time, you get it because they're so afraid of being exposed, and then everything, war breaking out, and they're kind of protecting Muggles in that way, but ready to fight Muggles at the same time. So it's kind of a weird thing. But what I'll say about most of this movie is it works. Like, it's a weird amalgamation of a lot of things, and it just worked for me. Like, my only howler was Ezra. There's other things I don't love, but they all work out. But all my issues are the next movie. It's like, well, I was so excited when I saw this. I was excited to see the picture of Zoe Kravitz, and then it's like, that does not pay off. Or, just remembering it just brought up like trauma.
Such a dad.
Yeah. See, Zoe Kravitz also ageless. I forgot that she played like a mom in Big Little Lies, but for some reason I'm like, I just think Zoe Kravitz can do anything. And so we were excited to see. Also, was there controversy around that? I don't remember that because she's a Lestrange. Was it
like that she's a Lestrange?
Okay, she's a Lestrange
black and the Lestranges are white.
And Lestrange is...
I don't think there was like controversy around, but I do think a lot of people are like, oh, that's weird.
Having a light-skinned black person somewhere in line she could be Bellatrix's great. Anyway, Bellatrix also we kind of thought was French at first, which she wasn't. I'm going to mention one more negative, then we're going to move on to start thinking of the most positive thing you took away. My last negative was some of the CGI. I think I just remember how some of the orcs and goblins look better in Lord of the Rings than in The Hobbit. Why is it that some of the goblin, there was the goblin speakeasy guy and there were a couple of house elves. They use, by the way, although they kind of look similar, those creatures both get like, that's the thing, that speakeasy almost gives you like Olga's Cantina vibes.
Well, and I was like, what is that? The singer?
I had to Google it. Oh,
what was
the
she?
singer. No, the singer I thought was a house elf. And
I thought so, but I was like, is she a half breed?
Is she half house elf, half goblin? Because the speakeasy owner is definitely a goblin. Also, there's a goblin-like creature that has a lot to do with Ilvermorny called a Pugwudgie, and I'm like, is that what but it doesn't look like it according to the Harry Potter wiki yet. Anyway, I'll do a deal
on that note though. One of the things that
Ilvermorny
I laughed out loud about and really like I don't know, for some reason just that's what was they get in the elevator and there's the house elf running the elevator and he's got like just a straight up like New York accent.
Yeah.
I laughed out loud. It was just hilarious because this is not what you're used to. And
We
then
would give that to US.
I know.
It seems
If
like
house
our
elves
house elves
aren't,
have a little more freedom. A little
yeah,
bit.
if our house elves aren't slaves, I think that should be pointed out. All right, Jamie, what is like one very positive thing you want to highlight here?
So my big positive was having a nomad, Jacob, which Mitch, you kind of mentioned this, but having a nomad and seeing the world through his eyes. I thought that was a really fun way of doing it. He's like delightful. I had only ever seen him in the
The
ping pong
Goldbergs?
movie.
Oh,
No, this was before Goldbergs, wasn't it?
you're right. It was.
It's the Balls of Fury.
Well,
Is he in that? And I was like, but I thought like I really enjoyed Dan's performance, but I just like how wide-eyed and being like, holy crap, what's happening? I just love that element of the whole movie. And even at the end, it's like to the point where you're sad at the end that his memory has to, not just because he had fallen in love with
It's very
Katie.
sad, yeah.
That's my favorite part about this movie. And we don't really get that in Harry Potter. Like all the muggles are kind of buttholes in Harry Potter.
Yeah. Well, in the Harry Potter, like Harry is your avatar, right? Him experiencing the magical world, but you really only get that that first film. It is interesting that they're able to, because they wipe his memory, you kind of get that twice with Jacob, which is kind of cool. But I actually have his number one too. Just something about the character. He's so like lovable, and him and Queenie and their little relationship is just so cute. And then you get to see him like interacting with the magic and how he gets to kind of be involved, and you learn like that even in the magical world, like people who don't have magic can still add value, and they can be an important part of like the plan or the heist or whatever it is that you need to do. So he was fun.
It was funny. Like it was a movie that needed some funny, and there was like a lot of funny moments that just came from that.
Also, it should be said the actor's name is Dan Folger, and he won a Tony recently for the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. And his biggest role is probably on The Walking Dead, which is quite well. Apparently, he was in House of the Dragon. I do not remember that. But anyway, he was on the Goldbergs for a bit. He's really had an interesting little thing, and I think it's kind of sad because this was maybe meant to be like, oh, I'm part of this big franchise, maybe a bigger part of his career. I think he's great, and I think the chemistry between the main four I think works really well. Overall, what I will say is, and this is a combination of the production design and the music, I thought it felt magical. It felt like I was being put into a big, well thought out world. And so I just and like the very beginning is the newspaper, which is called the New York Ghost, which I think is cool. And I wanted to like pause and read every single bit of that. And that's funny because that's kind of pretty prevalent in a few Harry Potter movies as well. And then it broadens things, like it starts to introduce just the right amount for me of new ideas and magic and everything. I remember in the run up to it, there was a picture op where you could pretend to be crawling out of Newt's trunk. And I did it, and there's actually a really good stop motion of me where it looks like, how people walk down the stairs fake behind a half wall? Yes. It really looks like I'm climbing up a ladder out of the trunk. I'm going to have to find it, and we will put it on Instagram. But anyway.
I have a picture of Isaac somewhere with the cut out.
I just think it felt like a big, magical, exciting adventure. And I think, but I mean, I remember not being super blown away or anticipating the second one. And I think, then they take a big misstep.
And I think I said this when we were watching the Harry Potter movies, is like, it's so nice to see magic because we are with the kids so much that you're seeing magic in the way of like learning and training, but like just everyday kind of magic, things like that, like more different magic moments, and then like experts doing magic, which we get like in the later Harry Potter films, like Dumbledore and Voldemort and stuff like that. But it's just kind of cool to see it happening a lot. And even the smoky apparating, which you guys love.
The smoky apparating, but it's supposed to be the Obscurus, which I think we should talk about. Is like the Obscurus is, they've held this in and their magic in, they essentially become a monster, and that probably relates to Dumbledore's sister, which is kind of a cool connection. It's a cool idea, but I'm watching Lost, and so I can't help but be like, there's the smoke monster and the apparition and the Obscurus all kind of look very similar. So is there anything that you guys felt like you're like, this didn't feel like the books? It made it feel really separate from that version of the magical world, because in the end, this was, like we said, it was very much made by the same people as the movies. This is the movie universe. Is there something that kind of made you feel like, oh, this is really, I need to push this away, it's one step away from the books?
Well, real quick, I do want to throw out one other thing I really like, which is the whole like suitcase theme and like concept. That he's got this like briefcase, and like you said, you can go in and there's just this massive world under there, and he's got this whole little like menagerie. Like that was a very cool moment. That was like up there for me with like, Harry walking into the tent at the Quidditch World Cup and being like, what's in here?
I feel like that's when we're like in a big theater, it would feel really the way each different terrain came alive. Like for
This
Magic to
was
do something
cool
like that
to
was
see in
really cool.
It was cool.
Yeah. Do you guys have any memories from your first time? Like I remember doing that picture thing, and then I remember seeing it, but I don't have any other memories of my first time seeing it.
I remember going to see it, and I feel like I saw it. I mean, it was around Thanksgiving, so I feel like I saw it that time with like probably a random group of people. I just remember feeling delightful at the end. Like I was like, that was good. I liked it. I thought all the performances were good. Like I wasn't like, this is the greatest thing ever, but I was excited. And then to mention the Obscurus, I immediately clocked that when they described what it was as like part of Ariana's story. So then that got me excited of like, oh, they are going to add Dumbledore to this. Like, so there was a little bit of that, but I honestly don't have a lot of memories of going to see this movie. I remember like them advertising it.
That's a huge compliment, though, I think, to think I got this subtle thing that's not quite an Easter egg. Like it was a clear connection, but the way it came together and then the way that they were deepening some of like the magical lore without doing anything too outrageous. I think that's a big compliment to walk out that way and to feel like you're sensing those things and story bits coming together.
Well, to answer your question, Mitchell, that you brought up about just like what didn't quite feel like it fit. I feel like in the Harry Potter movies and books, like you just had a very clear antagonist. Like you had very clear stakes, right? Like Voldemort wanted to take over the Wizarding World. He was trying all these different things to do it, right? And there was this process. That was one thing that I remember being confused about as I watched this, and even just rewatching it, right? It's kind of like, okay, the first part of the movie, it's kind of like, what is anybody's motivation? Like, what are they trying to do? And you get some like little individual ones, but there's not even like a clear, like, what is even wrong? And they mentioned Grindelwald enough times, but you don't make the connection till the very end that you're like, oh, he's Grindelwald and he's been involved the whole time. So much of that felt murky to me that it was unclear, like, what are we shooting for here? That I thought kind of hurt the story.
I think it's a different type of story. I think even though Hogwarts isn't that much in the seventh one, I mean, well, that is where the battle is, but it's like a school story. It's a coming of age story.
Yeah.
It's like this singular battle. And this, in some cool ways, felt like the world was more open. Like we didn't quite know where it was going to go. But at the same time, a couple things. One, because it was called Fantastic Beasts, they did have to have a lot of set pieces with the Fantastic Beasts. And that kind of felt like its own little world. Hagrid would have loved it. I'm not that big on animals. And also, there was a lot of destruction, and I don't love cringe stuff. Like I love Fast Five, but I'm also worried for the city of Rio. I don't know how they're going to put it back together. You know, there's
dragging statues on
like,
the highway.
The talk of like how superheroes destroy cities, and I'm like, that is a genuine thought of mine. Like how many people die in those,
but at least there's magic in this. Like at least there's magic, and they can have. But
like I get so stressed when they're destroying stuff, and that that's why when I say like it's a bit more of an action adventure, like it's a different tone, but that doesn't mean it couldn't have fit in that book world. But it felt like just a different style of story.
But it does pull it out a little bit too, in the sense of this kind of it takes you out of the real world, right? The whole idea is meant to be this magical world exists like within the real world, and we just never noticed it. But like if entire blocks were being blown up in New York, that's a very good point. Like that would have made it into the history books or something.
But they're erasing people's memories as they go.
I mean, I guess.
But I will. So I'll say I even thought about this as I was watching. Like, does it at all feel like the books? And I'm going to say no. But I also feel like there's an element of it where you're in a different time. So this is the 1920s, a very different time from the 1990s. And you're in a different country. And again, we haven't really played in the adult world of magic. So I was like, does that ruin it for me or make me feel? And I'm like, no, I'm okay with it. And I also, I get what they were trying to do. There's this balance of like, he's trying to contain the beast. They're trying to contain the Obscurus. Like this whole thing of like the Americans are trying to contain the whole wizard world. And it's all kind of like bursting out in the scenes. And that's kind of like the point of the movie. It's like the suitcase keeps like popping open. Like I get that theme overall about it. But it's a lot to juggle. But again, I'm surprised it worked. So, good for JK this one time.
It works for one. I have a couple of random thoughts, and then we'll bring this full circle to how it might incorporate into the future of the franchise. But one, the Ministry is at the Woolworth building, which is actually a very famous building in New York. And I thought it was really cool how they incorporated that in. I thought a lot of the New Yorkness is actually quite fun, and they picked something that I think people would be quite fond of. There was a little bit, and this is very David Yatesy, like there was a bit, I don't know if sepia is the word, but there was like a certain tone and feel to the city that didn't quite feel as maybe real as
It
I
felt like
wanted it
non-Americans came in and decided what 1920s
how to make
New
it.
York was.
Yeah,
it was a little
very clean.
stereotypy in some way,
Yeah.
and also
With
like a
those
little,
accents.
in some ways, kind of dogging on Americans. Not much, but like there's a little bit of like.
Also,
sure.
there's
It's
that
written from an external
speakeasy.
perspective.
There's that speakeasy on McDougal Street, which for some weird reason I remember that part. Someone said for a while that in Universal Studios, not in Islands of Adventure where the first Harry Potter was in, before a Diagon Alley, that you could go around the New York section of Universal Studios, Florida, and there was a door. You could go downstairs and there was a door that had this poster on it. And I looked for it for for ages and I couldn't find it. So I wonder if it was in Hollywood because they also have a New York section or not. But I need the world. I'm going to have to Google it. I need to know if that was real.
This happened.
Also, John Voight is in this film. That's very American, very random. And then I guess actually I will save my other thing for the next part, which is the Marauders map, where we talk about how could this play into the future of the franchise. And I think if the TV series, there's so much to cover that we want accurately, they can't bring in full new storylines. And I don't need the American centricness of it. But if they were to mention Ilvermorny, at one point, J.K. Rowling was asked if we'll ever learn about the American school. Because someone was like, do Americans go to Hogwarts? And she's like, no, get over yourself. You have your own school. No, but she said, just wait until the next book, which is Goblet of Fire. And I think everyone says, oh, she was just implying that we're going to learn about these other magical schools, which why does Europe get 3 and all of America goes to 1? All of South America goes to 1. All of freaking Asia, we only know of 1 in Japan, and yeah, all of Africa, there's only 1 that we know of. But apparently Europe, all that stinking, these Europeans just think they're so important. Anyway, I digress. I think little mentions of how big the world is and how different wizards do magic differently, and they have a Legilimens, which you think Snape could use Legilimency. That was kind of like a skill that he had, but it wasn't part of him, like being a Metamorph Magi is part of Tonks. And we talked about her in the draft, maybe using those powers more expansively, getting to see her do a bit more. Like, I think just knowing that the world is a little bit bigger and that could tease future spinoffs. I think if 3 or 4 seasons are popular, I wouldn't be surprised if we get a spinoff before this, or at least in development before it's all over. So I think just mentions of the bigger world, like give us a random shout to like that thing that happened in the 20s in New York. I don't know, or how the politics work differently in different countries. I'm not sure there is anything specific, but did you guys have anything Marauder map wise that you're like, the new TV series could take some ideas from Fantastic Beasts and use them well?
Missed opportunity. My only way this could tie in is if Jude Law had been cast as Dumbledore. That's what I wanted, and that's what I'll say. They could have just played off this series and connected it to the TV show, because this series really doesn't have much to do with the other movies. But that's fine also because the next movie sucks.
We keep saying that.
That was my connection.
That I think the third one, I only saw it once.
The third one is good.
I think it's good and actually wraps it up in a pretty good way. But
you just have to forget.
The podcast about the second one is going to be, it's going to be rough. Now,
I swore I would never watch that again, and I'm watching.
I remember that there's things about it I like, so I can be somewhat of a positive force about it. But anyway, Steve, did you see anything that you think, oh, this would be good to incorporate in the series, or a way that Fantastic Beasts can have some relevancy in the TV series?
I don't know. I mean, I think that we hear about all these people in history. Like, there's obviously the textbook. I think there's just some wiggle room in there to like flesh a little bit more out about it, right? It's just like, oh, he was a world traveler and he went to, these places, or he was actually more involved in that, basically that wizarding war than we realized. Like, I think there's some ways to add in a little bit of context. There's some lines in a class or something like that, so you can get a little bit more of just like feeling how big the world really is, rather than it's just Hogwarts and it's just the UK. But yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting. I do think, like you said, once you get to the 3rd and the 4th season, if it's doing well, like some of the spin-offs that we could see, I think this is one. I think that could be fun to play with.
I don't think they'd try this again, but you could take points from it. Like, you could take ideas from it.
Well, and I could see, like, so a really interesting idea someone had, I think it was on Reddit, I was reading through, was just that, like, the problem was, especially with the second movie, is that they tried to stick with, like, the Fantastic Beasts as, like, the main title, right? And they're like, screw that. They should have just dropped the Fantastic Beasts after the first movie, and they should have gone, you could have stuck with textbooks or something. Like, it could have been Quidditch Through the Ages and had, like, Quidditch players who had some kind of interaction or that followed the Grindelwald story from that perspective, right? Or, History of Magic. There's so many other ways they could have done with it. They kind of shoehorned themselves into it, like by that being the introduction. And I think that's a good point. They could have just dropped it. So there's so many little stories. They could almost do like I'm forgetting the word right now, but where every season is different of a show, like they don't really tie to each other.
Anthology.
And it's kind of like anthology. That's it. They could do like even just like 2 or 3 episodes about this side story and that side story. I think it would still be really cool and really fun to build the world that way.
Well, this is what I've been even going back and forth on. So I like the Fantastic Beasts element. I like seeing the creatures. I love especially I felt like that was a connection to the books and to the previous movies, like getting to see the
Niffler.
The Niffler or the Rump, what's it called?
Rumpethorn?
Yeah, Rumpet. Like I like seeing that. I have my Trickle die.
Oh.
So I like that, but part of me, like Steve was kind of saying, should they have named this Fantastic Beast and where to find them, and then kind of just move to a completely different name, or had named this like Newt Scamander, or make every title like the name of a book in the Harry Potter world? I don't know. Like, definitely the next 2 movies should not have been named Fantastic Beasts.
You could have just called them The Crimes of Grindelwald.
Yeah, they kind of pigeonholed them.
Yeah, they could have just gone with the subtitle as the name.
We get like Dumbledore and Grindelwald's like not their young adulthood where this all kind of boils up, and then this kind of gives us an ending. I think if they were to hash that story again, it's like there's too many interesting places they could go. Even if they want to go back to the founders or something, that would be more interesting than trying to rehash Grindelwald. But I'm sure it'll get brought up. But yeah, I think an anthology series is good. I think maybe a globetrotting series where they're like, we're going to spend a season in the States, we're going to spend a season in Africa. Like, give us some different aspects and feelings to the world. The other thing is, one key we said was seeing this world through a muggle's eyes. I think that is a good entry point into something else that could come about. I think, wasn't it that Ron was supposed to have like a second cousin that was a muggle or like something, and that was originally an
accountant or something,
was an accountant that was originally going to then have a kid that was magical, and that was going to be a storyline. Like, if one of those got introduced, I think it would be great. But these rumors keep going around that the first season, that all the seasons are only going to be 6 episodes, and I'll just be furious. I'll just be so mad.
What would be a really cool series though would be like something very like sports focused, like Quidditch, and that would be a great way to like tour the world, right? As they're going around like the
Quidditch
World
Through
Cup,
the
whatever
Ages,
it is,
the only other book
visiting all the. But I mean, it doesn't have to be that. It could be like a Welcome to Wrexham, like mockumentary style, but in the Wizarding world with like Quidditch as the focus or something. Like,
I want like a washed up Oliver Wood, like a 45-year-old Oliver Wood, just like still holding on.
Problem, and
he's in the second tier of the Quidditch Premier League, playing for the Chudley Cannons. I'm writing it as we speak. I think Quidditch is tough though, because it's so flawed as an actual sport, and she obviously got sick of writing it. But I think it would almost be funny I've always wanted to write a movie about a violin tournament where you never actually see or hear a violin. And now I'm like, maybe make a Quidditch show where you never actually see anyone. But no, I'm sure it would be good. Because the answer is, who is Joe going to let play in the sandbox at some point? Because that, that's a big question. They had like 8 Game of Thrones spinoffs in production at once, and they went with the safest one. They shot another pilot that didn't go through. They're going through another full adaptation, but they have all these other ideas, and it's like, is Joe even going to let there be kind of this little bake-off to see who else wants to play in the Wizarding world? Because she's maintained pretty control, whereas George Lucas let this whole expanded universe happen. And I'm not mad at Joe for that. I don't think that's necessarily a bad move for her, like financially or just in respect to the story itself. And it's led to a disturbing world of fan fiction. And on that note, I have a new segment called the Restricted Section. And this is going to be where, but I wrote a fan fiction about an American school, and I made up the name. And I don't want to repeat it just in case it's out there on the web. But anyway, I started to write the story, and it made me really go back and read all about Overmorning to think, was Joe's idea better than my idea? First of all, I hope they've opened a West Coast school by now. Second of all, I don't like that Overmorning is in Massachusetts, because I don't like Boston. It's just like a thing,
Wow.
But it makes sense that it's in New England, because that was the first place that obviously got majorly populated. But some background on Overmorning. This is the real restricted section, where just give a little bit of tidbit on something. It was started by an Irish witch and a Muggle Englishman, a nomad, sorry, an English nomad. And they had 2 of their own kids and 2 adopted kids. And that's kind of how it started. And their statues still sit outside the school. There are 4 houses that kind of represent the body, the heart, the mind, and the soul. And I can't remember the name of all of them. Pugwudgie, Thunderbird, Wampus. 3 out of 4 is pretty good. I remember getting sorted into Pugwudgie, and I was like, that's just not a nice word. And neither is Wampus, which is supposed to be like the strong one. And I don't like that it was started by an Irish person and an English person. It's like, come on, we can't even have our own history. And then controversially, there's a lot of Native American influence that ended up being part of the establishment of Ilvermorny, which is great because obviously I'm not there. America was where they inhabited first, and so it's cool that she tried to bring that in. But a lot of people feel like, similar to the name Cho Chang, she didn't do it in maybe the most sensitive way to bring that in, but I didn't read it that way. I read it as like a very positive, like it's cool that Native Americans were also involved in this. But yeah, it's 637 years after Hogwarts that it was built. Obviously the whole part of the world is newer, but that's your Ilvermorny backstory. And I think there's some stories to be told there, but I don't want to make it American centric. I'd rather we could do a story in another part of the world, but then it'd be in the wrong language. So I would have to read subtitles,
I think Horned Serpent's the other one. Did you say
Nailed
that
it. The Horned Serpents.
I was disappointed by the names.
I don't know if I was ever sorted for that one. How did they get sorted in that school? I can't remember.
Pottermore has one.
No, but I mean, like at the school, and
There's
they use
something
the
about
sorting
you
hat.
go in the forest and do something. I can't remember. It's like something kind of weird.
I should reread it. There's a lot more on there about Makusa and Ilvermorny than I remember. Like when I just started, I was like, oh, if you go to Pottermore, there's actually a lot more here. And there's some more recent history because of that game called Wizards Unite. Technically, they name a current minister of magic and they do a couple things. So there's actually some weird updated information about it that is technically canon if you want to stretch that far. Anyway, that's the American school, which only gets a pretty brief passing mention in this and then doesn't get brought up in the next 2 movies. Queenie just says it's the best magical school. And then they have a little moment where he's like, no, it's England, Hogwarts, whatever that. This is making me very anti-Hogwarts at the moment.
All the weird names, like Ilvermorny is but Hogwarts was a really weird word at the beginning too to get used to, right? So it might just be a matter of
But Hufflepuff sounded delightful the moment you heard it.
Yeah, that's a little better than Pugwudgie or whatever it is.
Because we just brought up Queenie, and there's the moment where she talks about Ilvermorny, we see Leta Lestrange, which we'll talk about next movie. Did you guys have an issue with the Legilimens thing? Like, she's a straight mind reader, which to me is, I never want someone inside my head. Like, I can't imagine there's anybody in the world who, I don't know.
I'm force wing to kill him.
It's not even that I think bad things. It's just like the weirdness. Oh.
I wouldn't want to be
really
around
interesting, but it opens up like a bit of a can of worms. It's like the time turner in Prisoner of Azkaban. It's kind of like by adding this element to the world, now it's kind of like twisted a lot of different things, and it really makes me wish that I had thought of Queenie back when we did our
No, we said no Fantastic
I totally would have grabbed.
Did we?
Oh, you're right. We
did.
We said we might do another one.
I'll save her for next time then.
But there are hints that Dumbledore can read minds.
But I think it's more like his is more selective and intentional. Because for her, it's also a bad thing that she almost can't stop it. It's like, isn't Daredevil the one who can't stop hearing people whisper? So he sleeps in that deprivation tank in the Ben Affleck version. Never forget.
I never watched it.
But yeah, I'm wondering if does Magneto's helmet stop her from reading his mind? I'm just curious anyway.
Well, and it does seem like she is really sheltered. Like she's like, oh, I'm never around no magic. So it's like she goes to work and goes home kind of a thing. And I wonder if that's part of that. And I wonder, are more people trained in occlumency to block her or block people like her? Like how common is this? I think some dumb stuff I don't want in my brain.
Yeah, you got to think that occlumency, it must be just more of a straight up element of what you learn if you know that she's around. Like if I were Tina, I just keep wanting to make Tina jokes about being teeny Tina, but anyway, she I wouldn't want my sister to know everything I'm thinking, so she must be good at occlumency. And then I'm still so mad at Harry Potter for not working harder at occlumency. That idiot.
Well, he was being tortured by Snape.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. All right, so the golden snitch of this one is, how successful do you guys feel like this was? It's hard to separate it, I know. How successful do you think this was as the first on-screen non-Harry centric piece of Wizarding World IP? How successful was it on a scale of 1 to 17? That's how many sickles are in a gallon.
I would give this a solid 13, I guess. I thought it did really well. And I was really surprised when I saw this movie. I was shocked by the Grindelwald thing. Like, you start suspecting it, like, planted, and, like, you start suspecting it kind of in the movie, but you don't think that he's Grindelwald. You just think he works for Grindelwald. So, like, that was a huge shock to me. And then that it was Johnny Depp was like, whoa. And I wasn't completely shocked, but that, like, it was Ezra and it wasn't the little sister. Like, a lot of twists and turns really threw me in this. And then I got really excited. Ending this movie, I was excited because we were going back into the world that we knew when Grindelwald was introduced. And we had been hearing about this battle for, like, 7 books. And it's like, I want to see this huge battle. So, I don't know. I thought it was successful. This movie, I have to, like, just remember how I felt after I saw this one because it gets all effed up.
That's it for me. I mean, I think it comes down to it was the first foray into something non-Harry, right, in the Wizarding world. And it was fun. Like, it was magical. You had some really cool moments. You get your funny, Jacob, and you're seeing things through the eye of a muggle. And it was really cool to kind of, like, kick everything off, right? Like, this is like our entry point. It's going to get so good from here. And so I remember having really high hopes, and it has its imperfections. Don't get me wrong. There were things about this didn't quite feel right, but it was like we were willing to forgive all of that because this was our ticket back into the magical world, and they were going to expand from here. It was going to be awesome, and there was so much, like, hope and excitement. And so that's what I remember most from it. So I would say it was very successful in that regard.
And you didn't see it coming, I think, too. But also, I just want to say, shout out to Eddie Redmayne. I thought he did so good. Even having to do that stupid dance for the creature. But, you just are so endeared to him. You believed it,
yeah.
So good on him.
You are immersed in the world. And that's, like, I was thinking about giving it a 12, and I was like, is that too low? Is that because I do like it? But I still think walking out of the theater, I had enjoyed it. I had really liked moments of the world broadening and some of the ideas in it. And I was emotional about a lot of things, which I think is a good point. But I think because of I just remember also not feeling like this, I was inspired with an insane amount of excitement for, like, this is the next step. Maybe it's just not the type of story I was looking for. Although I will say everyone wants, like, an Aurora detective story. That also does not intrigue me, I will say. But it's something the British would do. So yeah, I would say 12. I'd say I liked it. It just fits that I liked it a little less than Jamie. But yeah, do you guys have any final concluding thoughts or quippy notes that you had on this film that we need to cover?
Well, I also have to say, I've actually probably rewatched this more than I've watched a lot of the Harry Potter movies. Not 5 on of the Harry Potter movies, but the first 4, I've definitely this is a movie that I'll just throw on. I like it. And, like, the ending, and since it is written as a movie and it wasn't like a book adapted, there's really good set piece. It follows the 8-sequence movie kind of pattern. Like, if you know how, like, screenwriting goes, I don't know. It's, like, comforting in that way for me. I like it.
Steven, did you have any final thoughts?
I mean, I think I've shared most of it. I think it was fun. It gives me hope for, like, the ability to. I know that there's been more misses, I feel like, than there have been, like, what's the word? Hits? It's just been, but it feels like there's hope that they can create something fresh and new out of the material that is original, and they can kind of run with it. And so just kind of having the Wizarding world reinvigorated by this series, it really, again, hopefully it's not misplaced, but, like, it's giving me hope again that, like, we could have some really cool stuff coming out in the future. And if they screw it up real bad, then I'll eat those words, I guess, and we'll just have to stick with what we got.
No, it definitely made me feel, as honestly bits of Chriselle did, that I was like, oh, something that is outside of the realm of what we have, like, can have really successful elements. It's just like, can they recreate something we've already had and incorporate a different style, but propel that story and make it really good again? Jamie, how did you hang that blanket behind you?
Magic.
What? Is there just
it's on a clothing rack.
Where's rack? I was like, is there a clothing line going from above your bed to above the TV?
I was gonna say, that's dedication. You, like, ran a line across your room.
I just used that line.
Whatever.
You were there.
So after this, we're going to watch Fantastic Beasts 2, but we're, going to give it a little breather so that Jamie can ramp herself up for it. But it's the summer, so, you guys both have big vacations coming up. I don't get a vacation this year because I have a birth coming up at some point. So we may have some pods with 2 of us. We may have some special guests on the way. We have some really fun ideas. So stay tuned for some new voices, exciting subjects. And then eventually we will finish Fantastic Beasts, which when we first started, I kept being like, maybe we'll do Fantastic Beasts. I'm really glad that we did. I'm actually feeling very positive about watching the trilogy. I think it is a productive discussion towards HPTV, the actual show. And as news comes out, obviously we will, there's only a bit more casting. So, and we're not going to get a teaser for a long time, but we might get some interviews or something, if they do a press conference or they start letting the kids maybe do some sort of press. We'll definitely cover anything that comes along for the TV show. But while we're killing time before real material arises, we're going to still have great people on and have fascinating discussions, and we'll watch. Maybe we'll have to watch a Harry Potter musical. Have you guys ever seen that?
No, I've never watched.
Darren
There's
Chris,
a lot of
that's where he
stuff
got
out
his
there.
start.
Harry and the Potters. There's this whole
You guys can read my
world.
fan fiction. No, I'm kidding. It's got to be dead.
Reading fan fiction allowed here on the podcast.
I would have to change my name. Christy, actually, my childhood friend, she still has like a picture of a notebook where there's like 4 sentences of a fan fiction I wrote, and I'm like, I can't believe it. It made me want to vomit. Anyway, thanks for joining us on HPTV. Please let us know your thoughts. If you have any ideas or feel like there's something that we missed, you can find us on social media at HPTVPod on TikTok and Instagram. And you can email us at HPTVPodcast@gmail.com. Jamie, send us away.
Peace out, snitches.